Ever feel like you're doing this teaching thing alone? You don't have to be. Shared teaching is all about sharing the workload through the power of collaboration and teamwork. Together, we'll walk through all the difficult parts of teaching and learn how to streamline our processes, fine-tune our time management, and develop a more manageable workload. If that sounds like a dream come true to you, then welcome to the Shared Teaching Podcast. Let's share in the teaching to make those dreams a reality. Now here's today's Shared Teaching. Hello and welcome back to the Shared Teaching Podcast. I'm your host, Susan, and I am so thankful you're here with me today. I try to put out regular weekly podcast episodes, but for those of you who are not familiar, I am a full-time teacher in a Title I school, and this year, I don't know what it is, but it's been a lot harder to get back on track and to keep up with things like my podcast in the after hours when I get home. So I am really hoping to try to make a big effort to make sure that I continue to put out these episodes for you. So bear with me. And here we go, starting over with a new week. And today we're going to talk about the key to a successful formal teaching observation. Now, after 15 years in education, I've had just a few formal teaching observations in my time, including one that I just had this week, and I've got another one coming up next week. Yes, you heard me right, 2 almost back to back. Yay! And it's got me thinking, what makes a successful observation? So if you're new to teaching, I'm happy to kind of be your guide for this. And if you're not new, but maybe you're changing grade levels, maybe you came from middle to elementary, it's just a whole different breed in elementary school. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through what I've noticed in my years and what helps me get a decent score every time. Now, I'm not going to say that I get like top of the top because nobody in my school really seems to do. They just kind of give a blanket same grade across the board, which is crazy. Don't even get me started. But this is what you can do to make it just not be horrible, I guess you could say. Wow, I'm doing great today. Okay, so the first thing is being prepared. And while this step is pretty obvious, it's also the most crucial step to having a good observation. It's normal to be nervous for your principal to step into your classroom. I still get nervous every single time. And of course, I get nervous when I'm called to the principal's office because I'm always thinking like, oh gosh, what did I do wrong? Usually it turns out to be like no big deal, but it's just that feeling, right, that comes to you. So some of the things you can do to be prepared first is review your lesson plan. Now, when you have your observation, you usually need to submit your lesson plan ahead of time, so you should already know exactly what you're teaching. And you're going to take time when you're creating your lesson plan to ensure that it has all the parts your administrator is going to be checking for when they come and observe you. For me, this means I needed to pay special attention to how I am assessing my students, that I'm posting the objectives and referencing them during the lesson, and having some kind of student interaction throughout the lesson. My administrator, of course, will also be looking at my lesson plan itself to make sure that I have I do, we do, and you do components as set by my school district. Now, my school district also has, and I'm in Nevada, so we have the NEPF, the Nevada Educator Professional Framework, I believe is what it's called. And so that kind of gives you an overview of what each standard is that you're going to get graded on. So I highly suggest asking your administrator or your school to see this observation tool that they're going to use during your observation. If you're new to teaching, you're just going to ask to see how you're evaluated so you can plan to have these components in your lesson. It's different for each state, but it shouldn't be a total secret. You should be allowed to have this document or the checklist, a blank checklist, just to see the categories. So it's not a complete surprise. All right, so another thing you can do for planning for your assessment is to check on like your classroom management. Your admin is really coming to see that and how the students are learning. So since I often think of my end goal first, we're going to talk about how to show your administration you're assessing the students. One of my favorite ways to assess on the fly is to have my students record answers on a whiteboard. I'm a huge fan of every student gets a whiteboard, and this is really great during math class in particular. So I like to give students a countdown before they show their answers because it kind of helps cut down on students looking around when you've already shown the answers and picking an answer to write for themselves. So I'll do something like, give me the answer to this problem. I'm going to count down from 10, and then I'll say like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, show me. And they know when they hear show me, they got to flip their whiteboards up, done or not. And then that gives them all the same amount of time for think time. And then, like I said, it cuts down on them looking around and like scrambling to write an answer. Those kids are really easy to catch, and you're going to know who they are anyway. But whiteboards, always my good go-to. It really helps keep the students engaged. It gives them a one-on-one thing to do, right? So it's not like 5 kids are waiting on one kid that's doing something, right? You have everybody engaged, everyone doing something. And then this is also a way to show that like everyone's thinking of the problem. Another way that's easy to assess students is to give like a quick thumbs up or thumbs down. Now this can be in response to another classmate's answer or to a point that you're making. You can also provide an answer. Let's say the answer is 29. And then you ask students to give a thumbs up or thumbs down if they agree or disagree. And then you're going to call on students and ask them why they agree or disagree, right? My last favorite way to show assessment is just to have a quick exit ticket. So an exit ticket, in my opinion, can be a 1 question or up to like 3 questions. It's just very short, very quick, right? It's called a quick exit ticket, I guess, or just an exit ticket. These are just printed on a small piece of paper. So maybe you can fit like, 12 on a sheet, 9 on a sheet, and then you just cut them apart, right? And so each kid has a paper like the size of a Post-it note. And then they're going to just jot down their answer or fill it in, whatever it is. And then you collect it as students leave the class. If you're in elementary, you collect it before you transition to the next subject. And then you go back and you kind of look through the answers and you can kind of gauge your groups for the next day based on what they put on these exit tickets. So they're really great. Okay, another thing you want to do for your observation is to add in some kind of engagement. Now, if you teach younger students, you will want to build in plenty of ways to keep students engaged throughout the lesson. Adding in ways to assess throughout the lesson, such as those individual whiteboards, can really help with this, but also having moments for students to turn and talk to discuss a question is helpful. You want to make sure as well that you've practiced these engagement strategies before your observation. Otherwise, it can be a little bit of a disaster. You don't want to spend all your time during the observation explaining how to do a turn and talk and speak appropriately and how to respond to a student's answers appropriately, and your admin's watching. So you want to make sure that you've had some time to practice through these things. So another way to add engagement is to use Kagan strategies. I really love Kagan. If you haven't heard of it before, Kagan. And one of my favorites is fan and pick. I also like rally coach, and then stand up, hand up, pair up, which is a really fun way to get them moving around the classroom, finding a partner and discussing something. And these are all, of course, things that you have to kind of prepare ahead of time. But once they know the strategy of it, it can be really easy to pop into your lessons, and then it looks amazing to your administration because you're adding just kind of an extra layer of engagement, and they really like to see that. So again, you want to plan ahead, teach any new strategies before your observation day, a week or so before, depending on how much time you want to practice it, but just make sure the students know the format. Okay, another thing you're going to want to pay attention to for your observation is your classroom environment. Now, while your principal is there to see you teach and how you're going to teach, they also will likely comment on your classroom environment. This could be how you interact with your students to what the physical room looks like. You'll want to make sure to shine in both areas on your observation day, especially if you're hoping to get one of the higher scores. Now, for my observation, I like to make sure to have my posted objectives on the board and my learning criteria just in front of the room. That's something that they're a big stickler for, is having posted objectives. I'm sure you've all heard of this and seen the Facebook dialogue on all of this stuff, but a lot of principals want it, and so you stick it up there, right? Make them happy. It's easy to do. Now, I do have already done for you second grade objectives if you are a second grade teacher. So you can check my show notes for those. And I also have a daily schedule that I love. I post this as well so students can see what is happening during the day. It really cuts down on like when's math, when's lunch, when's recess, what special do we have today? If you post it in the beginning of the day every day, and then I have mine on magnets, and it's just really easy to swap out the special or rearrange things if there's like an assembly and stuff like that. And then it's just posted. You just point to it. Students can look at it. And admin likes to see it as well because they like to see how your day is structured. Are you following their special master's schedule and all that stuff? Now, next, I'll do a quick clean of the room, restack any of the piles, right? So make sure it looks like it's not a tower that's going to fall over and hurt a small child. I like to get rid of any extra papers that I no longer need. Just a quick little spruce up, right? I don't want to run around not being able to find the materials I'm looking for when it comes time for the lesson. I don't want to show my admin that I'm disorganized, even if I might be a disorganized person. In my classroom, I'm fairly organized, so I like to keep up on that, and I like to show my admin when they come in, like, I really know what I'm doing. Like, look, I can find my things, and I know how my lesson is structured, and the kids are engaged, and I'm not spending 20 minutes looking for a piece of paper that I misplaced, right? So you just want to be on top of it. Last but not least is having follow-up, and this is for after your observation. So many times my administration has come to observe my lesson and they just don't stay for the whole time. And they're busy, right? They don't want to stay for the hour or whatever it is that your lesson time takes. And now that I'm a gifted instructor, like my time frame for a lesson varies, right? It could be 50 minutes, it could be 75 minutes. They just don't usually have time in their schedule to stay from start to end. And a lot of times they get called away on something that takes precedence, right? So I've also had it where they stay way longer than expected. And now if they come, but they leave early and they're missing some kind of key point of the lesson, such as the assessment piece or the student engagement, don't be afraid to follow up with them and send them an email. This observation I just had last week, my admin only stayed for the warm-up activity. They missed the entire rest of the lesson, including my really amazing Kagan fan and pick section and the kids building structures of neurons. Like, she missed all of this goodness, right? So I emailed her my teaching slides along with some pictures I quickly snapped of the kids doing those activities. And now, unfortunately, she's going to come back next week and see me again with a different lesson. But at least she'll come and see those parts that she missed the first time. So I'm just going to duplicate what I did before, of course, with different material now because we've moved on from talking about the neurons. But there you have it. At least they're familiar. At least they know. And then she's giving me another opportunity to kind of like rectify myself, I guess you could say, because she skipped out on most of the lesson. Now, most observations, you do meet afterwards with your principal to discuss what they saw, and they will give you a chance to explain your thought process as you moved through the lesson and discuss what took place after they left. This is the time to advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to speak up and tell them your choices of why you did this, or, I did notice that it's always Johnny, isn't it? I noticed Johnny was over in the corner not paying attention. He was, ripping up little tiny pieces of paper, building a fort. Who knows, right? Like, it's Johnny. But tell them, like, you did notice these things, and these are the things that you have in place to kind of help him. So don't be afraid to do that too, or the opposite. Say, I did notice that he struggles a lot during lessons and getting his attention. Is there anything that you could recommend that I can kind of work on? And then that will show them that you're proactive and that you're wanting to help and you do notice these things, right? Nobody's perfect, so it's okay. If things happen in your observation, there's always things that will happen. There's kids that will misbehave that usually shouldn't misbehave, and now that the principal's in the room, they're misbehaving. That's what happened to me this week. But it was also on like this day where they had this fun run thing, and my schedule was already mixed up, and I had to have double the students that I normally have when I would have had half the rest of the grade comes at the same time because they didn't want to miss out on the fun run. It was just crazy. It was just a crazy time to have an observation. But the point is, things happen, and you just have to go with the flow. They're looking for that flexibility in you. They're looking for what makes you a great teacher. So just show them. Think about what makes you a great teacher and just plan on lessons that play to your strengths. Okay, so I would love to know, after you've listened to this episode, how do you prepare for your formal teaching observation? Is there anything I left out? Anything you want to tell people? If you're looking at this on a blog post on shareteaching.com, go ahead and leave a comment on the post. Otherwise, you can always leave a comment wherever you see this podcast episode, but especially if it's in Apple, you can leave a note right there and just make sure you tell me it was episode 139 about formal observations so people can connect the comment with Apple Podcasts with what specific episode you were listening to. All right, bye for now. Don't forget to tune in on Wednesday where I have another Writing Tip Wednesday episode coming out for you. Bye for now.
If you've loved this show, then join me in sharing the teaching,
hitting that subscribe button,
and leaving us a review on
iTunes,
so we can be found by more teachers like you who are ready to start sharing the workload. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Find new episodes each week on shareteaching.com. Thanks for listening to the Share Teaching Podcast.